I arrived at the grand old estate. White columns, sweeping staircase, ivy crawling up every stone with a bouquet of lilies in hand, and my heart pounding so hard I thought it might echo across the marbled floors. They'd sent me a gilded invitation months ago, embossed with flowing script. Cordially requests the pleasure of your company at their wedding. Me, the woman they'd called just our babysitter at his best man toast. Yet here I stood, stepping into their world, determined not to shrink into a memory. I first met him 9 years ago when he was 6, that silver-haired boy with a mischievous grin and a knack for disappearing under cribs and behind drapes. His mother, my best friend from college, was caught by surprise when an urgent meeting in Zurich forced her to find someone fast to care for her son and infant daughter. I answered the call without hesitation, half expecting a weekend gig. Instead, I inherited a tiny pair of sneakers, a crayon scribbled drawing of a family, and a ring of spilled Cheerios at the foot of the breakfast table. "Emma, grab your shoes," I'd said that first morning, sweeping Cheerios into a coffee can. The boy, Ethan, looked at me like I'd just invented lunch. "What's for breakfast?" he asked. Arms crossed. "Whatever you can find that doesn't need a permission slip," I teased, tying his laces. His eyes lit up. "Pancakes, pancakes," and so began our tradition. Saturday mornings in the kitchen, syrup drizzling, laughter bouncing off the walls as we talked about his school crushes and the shapes elephants make in clouds. By the time his sister arrived, our household had become a ragtag circus of homework, dress-up parades, and bedtime stories that always ended with him begging an extra chapter of Harry Potter. Over the years, my role evolved, school projects transformed into college applications, scraped knees became heartbreaks and boy troubles. I was more than a sitter, I was confidant and coach, taxi driver and cheerleader. At every milestone, graduation, first job, moving day, I sent a card, a care package, a box of homemade cookies. When his mother died, I sat on the edge of his bed, promising I'd never let him face the dark alone. He clutched my hand like a lifeline. So when he called me just a babysitter at his best man's toast 3 months ago, my heart shattered. It was supposed to be his moment to honor our years together, to thank the person who'd been there since his first step. Instead, he quipped, "Let's thank Jane, our babysitter, just someone who entertained us while we found real help." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. My cheeks burned, but I smiled and nodded, because I was a professional. I'd swallowed harder truths for less. When his wedding invitation arrived, engraved in gold, I froze. It was a choice crystal clear, attend and swallow my pride, or skip and lose a decade of memories. I chose the former. I reasoned that he'd regret it, apologize. I'd give him that chance. I bought a gown in midnight blue, the kind that made me feel like a queen. I practiced my tight-lipped smile in the mirror. I mentally rehearsed small talk with family members. I barely knew, yes, the weather is lovely, and congratulations on this beautiful day. That wedding day, the estate loomed like a palace rising from the mist. Parked cars stretched around the drive, guests milling on the lawn. I stepped out of my car, clutching lilies against my side, and saw him for the first time in months, taller, broader-shouldered, tuxedo impeccable. His bride, radiant in lace, hovered at his side. They laughed together, a private joke I couldn't share. I forced my grin and offered my hand as they approached. "Jane," he said, voice warm but eyes flicking past me to the bridal party. "You look wonderful." "Congratulations," I replied, pressing his hand briefly. His bride gave me a polite nod before her veil whisked her away to pose for photographs. I watched her slim profile vanish, heart slipping. Inside, the reception hall glittered with crystal chandeliers and white roses. Each place setting held a menu and a small favor, a silver tin of mints with the couple's initials. I took mine and tucked it into my purse, somewhere between the breadsticks and the champagne flutes. I'd find solace. I found an empty seat by the punch bowl, my grudging refuge, and sipped lemonade until the ceremony space reopened for dinner. Guests moved to the long tables, clad in silk and tuxedos, laughter rising to the rafters. I watched the couple take their seats at the head table, their smiles luminous. He leaned in to whisper something. She tilted her head, her laugh bright. I reminded myself, you chose to be here, stay. We dined on lobster bisque and filet mignon, nothing like my Saturday morning pancakes, yet each bite tasted like salt and tears. My phone vibrated in my clutch, a text from Mara. "How you doing? I tapped back. Still here, counting breaths. She typed back, I believe in you. At last, the best man took the floor. He cleared his throat beneath the spotlight and tapped his glass. Silence fell like a curtain. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, eyes twinkling. We're here tonight to celebrate Ethan and Claire, two wonderful people, masters of charm and kindness. But before we dive into the romance, let's honor someone who helped raise our groom. Jane, she's been with us since he was 6, guiding him, teaching him, and yes, entertaining him on those long Saturday mornings. He paused, my breath hitching, though frankly, she spent more time keeping me in line than babysitting. A ripple of laughter. Thank you, Jane, for everything from the pancakes to the pep talks to dealing with his teenage experiments in the kitchen. My chest eased as applause rose. Relief blossomed, maybe he'd practiced and redeemed himself. Then his tone shifted. Of course she was just our babysitter. His voice dropped. But hey, I heard the going rate for an alliteration master and puppy wrangler is about what my new wife paid the florist, right, Claire? He laughed, clinked his glass. Others joined in, some chuckled uncertainly. My stomach turned, I froze. Just our babysitter. The world narrowed, the chandeliers dimmed, the buzz of conversation shut out. My palms burned. I saw his bride's face, stiff with mirth, then flicking away. My seatmates all glancing at me, smiles polite but distant. The water in my glass sloshed. I set it down hard. I should have stood up, strung a sentence like I was the one who held him when his mother died, across the table. But I stayed silent, heart pounding a battle drum. A flash of her white gown, the spark of his cufflinks, everything dissolving in humiliation. I slipped from the table, heading toward the library door marked private events. I needed air. Outside, the night was cool and quiet, except for distant laughter and clinking glasses. I hugged my lilies, fighting tears. The stars overhead were bright, silent witnesses to my disgrace. That's when I felt the weight of the mints in my purse. They were gift favors on every plate, silver tins, monogram etched. I snapped one open and found the mints inside, but beneath them, folded crepe paper wrapped around a slim slip of paper. I pulled it free. Guest list amendment. Please add the following names to the official guest register, effective immediately. My breath caught. Underneath, scrawled in the couple's script, was a list of 6 names I recognized from whispered phone conversations. His mother's dearest friend Reggie, his 2 sisters who'd been disinvited 6 months ago, his best friend from preschool, who he'd never told Bride about, and, the one that made my breath stop, my own name, Jane Marshall, listed under Family VIP. I blinked. They'd tried to brand me just a babysitter, but that paper said something else. I slipped it into my palm and pressed it to my heart. The night air felt like velvet as I slipped back inside, passing the hall of mirrors where couples preened. In the library, I found the groom bustling with his fixer, his father in a crisp suit, whispering about the delay in photo sessions. I edged forward, heart thundering. He looked up, worry in his eyes. Jane, are you okay? I drew in a slow breath. Funny story, I said softly, voice steady. I slipped the amendment paper across the polished mahogany bar. His father's eyes flicked. The groom paused, confusion darkening his face. I felt dozens of gazes sharpen on me from the open door. The newlyweds hushed mid-kiss. The best man spilled his drink. The DJ's playlist stuttered to silence. I looked at the room full of smiling faces and realized this moment could tear the night open, exposing every lie. My lips curved into a small, triumphant smile. It seems the guest list has changed, and as everyone turned to read, the promise of chaos unfurled like confetti. The hush that fell over the guests felt like a sheet snapping taut, each pair of eyes fixed on the silver-etched slip of paper in my hand. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then the murmurs began, soft at first, then rolling like thunder through the vaulted hall. I let the paper fall to the bar in front of me. 5 names embroidered in the couple's own script. Samantha Sam Holt, Reginald Price, Madeline Maddie Carter, Marcus Mark Johnson, and directly beneath, in the same elegant flourish, Jane Marshall. The hall's golden light caught each name in turn. I watched as recognition struck. The best man, his cheeks pallid, swallowed the last of his spilled drink. The new bride's father froze mid-step, wine glass poised to his lips. His mother, poised at the head table, dropped her fork with a clink on the china plate. Even the violinist faltered, bow skittering across a string in dissonance. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, voice steady though my heart thundered at full tilt. It seems there's been a last-minute adjustment to the guest list. I lifted the paper and watched the room lean in. It names 5 people whose presence was deemed essential. VIPs, as the script says, to honor today's celebration. A polite cough rippled through the crowd. Lord Ainsworth, his waistcoat as immaculate as ever, rose from the Pedersen family pew. He waved my paper awkwardly. Miss Marshall, I'm afraid I don't understand. These names, unless you're suggesting they've been clandestinely added, don't appear in the official RSVP. I shook my head, lifting my chin. Quite the opposite, Lord Ainsworth. They appear in the very document your son and daughter-in-law signed moments ago as final. I tapped the envelope nestled beneath the bar, sealed only minutes before, by my own hand. So signed by both of them. A ripple of shock passed through the family's inner circle. The bride's mother, porcelain-faced, leaned forward. This is preposterous. We drafted that guest list weeks ago. I met her gaze, then perhaps someone borrowed it, amended it, and resealed the envelope. One would hope to do so with good reason. My gaze slid to the bride and groom for the first time. Ethan, Claire, care to explain why 5 strangers hold VIP status over those who raised you? Time dilated. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Ethan glanced at his bride, then at me. His mouth opened. Jane, this you don't understand. I pressed a finger to my lips. Actually, I understand all too well. I turned to the gathering. Allow me to refresh your memory. These 5 are the very people who stood at your sides, who carried you in tragedy and triumph. Sam, your oldest friend who taught you to ride that bicycle. Reginald, your godfather, who came rushing from Paris when your mother died. Maddie, your sister, disinherited for daring to speak the truth about your family trust. Marcus, your former roommate at college, who saved you from that campus scandal. And me, your babysitter, the one you called just a caretaker in your toast. Ethan shook his head, pale as fresh linen. This can't be right. It is, I said. I made sure it was, with your signatures. I gestured to Lord Ainsworth, who hastily produced the now chocolate-stained contract from the marriage register. As you can see, here are both your names, paired with every change, initialed in your own hands. He stared at the page as though it were a puzzle he could not solve. The bride, flustered, looked to her father for rescue. He blinked, confronted by evidence he could neither ignore nor explain. Why? Claire whispered, tears tracking down her cheeks. Why did you do this? I folded my arms. Because at your wedding, at the moment you should have honored those who stood for you, you belittled me, and by extension, every single person who cared for you when you couldn't care for yourself. My voice softened. Sam and Reginald know that, and your grandmother still writes to them every Christmas. Maddie lost her inheritance for having the courage to speak the truth. Marcus was there when the press accused you unjustly. And I sat by your side as you learned to tie your shoes, read your first words, and yes, suffered without your mother. I folded my arms. I already have. You threw it away. Claire's shoulders shook. Ethan's jaw clenched. Silver platters trembled in the hands of passing servers. I gifted you this, I said, indicating the guest list surprise. Because you needed a reminder. Weddings are not just ceremonies for your own glory. They're tributes to the community that shaped you. Silence stretched, taut as harp wire. Then from the end of the long table, Lord Ainsworth's voice rang. Enough. He strode forward, face purpling with anger. This charade, this public humiliation, has gone far enough. I met his glare, unblinking. Is it humiliation to expose the truth? He sneered, the gilded chair creaking beneath him. You overstepped, Jane. Weddings are not for airing grievances. Weddings are for truth, I countered. And yours needed airing. Claire sobbed openly. Ethan ran his hands through his hair, ashen. For a heartbeat, I thought he might apologize. Then he turned to her and embraced her in a fierce hug, murmuring, I'm sorry. Claire looked up at me, eyes fierce despite tears. Thank you, she whispered. You were right. I nodded. Sam, whose cheeks glistened with tears, rushed forward and enveloped Claire in a brother's hug. Reginald and Marcus flanked him, arms outstretched like triumphant pillars. A murmur of applause swept the hall as the family's inner circle converged into a knot of contrition and relief. Lord Ainsworth stood rooted, face ashen. After a moment's pause, the bride's mother stepped forward. She tapped her stiff fan on the table, calling for order. We will have a short recess, she said, voice brittle. Please allow us to regroup. Guests began to disperse, puzzles of conversation springing up in clusters. Aunts exchanged worried glances, cousins shook their heads. The live band, uncertain, shifted to a soft waltz, as if hoping music might smooth the abrasions. I pocketed the guest list and lilies, my palms still tingling. I hadn't come to punish. They'd punished themselves. I came to honor what I, and so many others, had done for Ethan and Claire. They would remember this day, I realized, not as the day their just babysitter stormed their wedding, but as the day they reclaimed their story. As the library doors closed behind the final stragglers, I walked past the dessert table, flourless chocolate cake and petit fours arranged like pastel jewels. I paused before turning to leave, glancing back at the bridal pair huddled together, recovering in the great hall's half-light. Claire caught my eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry." I gave her a small nod. Outside, the night air smelled of magnolia and promise. I pressed the lilies to my chest, petals brushing my chin. My heels clicked across the marble steps toward the limo, waiting with its door ajar. A single guest lingered there. My first charge, little Ethan at 6, now 6 feet tall, and learning to navigate his own life. He wrapped me in a hug that squeezed the wind from my lungs. "Thank you," he said, voice thick with gratitude. "I see you now." I closed my eyes. "Always." I climbed inside the car, the door closing softly between our worlds. The engine purred to life, and as the limo rolled away from the estate, pools of light slipping behind us, I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. I had not come to the wedding to be a spectator. I came to be a catalyst, to remind them that love is woven by many hands, and that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever truly just babysitting. And as the estate's lights faded into the distance, I carried with me something far more precious than lilies or applause, the certainty that I had honored my own worth, and theirs under the vaulted arc of that gilded celebration.